Oliver called it a landmark agreement, a plan for a national securities regulator. Ontario and British Columbia have already backed it. Now New Brunswick and Saskatchewan have also signed on. What finally made Saskatchewan get on board, and what's their message to the provinces that are saying just no? Also, Industry Minister James Moore has talked about breaking down those trade barriers among the provinces and territories. Now there's a renewed push for free trade inside Canadian borders, and it comes from the prairies. Why is Brad Wall pushing other premiers to get on side with that one? The Premier of Saskatchewan joins me now from Regina. Good to see you, Brad Wall.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Finance Minister Joe Oliver applauding your province and New Brunswick for going ahead and joining this single national securities regulator, saying it's a landmark. Explain to us why it is so important for your province and why you decided to buy in.
Well, I think we appreciated the federal government's case that Canada, I think one of the only major countries in the Western world that didn't have a national regulator. And that was arguably problematic for companies looking in on our country, considering doing business here, and Canadian companies that need to go to the markets at any given time. And that was a reasonably solid case. We don't have quite the mature sort of investment market, I would argue, in some parts of the country, including Saskatchewan, that you'd have obviously in Toronto. And so we wanted to make sure there was local flexibility and a local presence for the regulator, and we've been able to negotiate that as a part of the agreement. So we think, after consultation with our own sector, our own investment community, that we're in a good spot, and we do appreciate the argument about the importance of one national regulator, and so now we're happy to have signed on to the agreement.
Of course, as you know, Quebec, Alberta both say they aren't very interested. I want to show viewers what the Quebec Finance Minister has said. Take a listen.
Quebec and Alberta, the two provinces that have from the start been the most vocal against this system, the two provinces remain opposed to this system, and we have no intention of joining this new entity.
What's the point in having a national regulator without the cooperation of these two provinces? I mean, that's where a lot of stuff is happening. A lot of businesses are happening in those two provinces.
Well, I think we have incremental progress here. We had a passport system prior to this national regulator, which was perhaps less effective or less efficient, but got us down the road to accomplishing some of the objectives of a national regulator. This is a next step, I think, and I guess we can all remain hopeful that perhaps those provinces will change their mind. And in the meantime, I think there is incremental progress here that's worth noting.
Let's move on to a topic that you're interested in talking about, interprovincial trade. The Industry Minister came on this show and talked to us about how important he thinks it is to break down these trade barriers inside Canada, which he really thinks cripples the national economy. How important is this for your province, and why are you trying to make a push for it as well?
Well, we're an exporting province. You know, Ontario is a more important export market for us than China. So, and other provinces play a big role in our export market as well. Trade's very important, and to the extent we have unhelpful and unnecessary trade barriers at the provincial level, we think we ought to change that. We have the U.S. partnership in Alberta, BC, and Saskatchewan, and it's imperfect as well, but it's created some common sense changes, like one regulatory regime for transportation, a process where a business license in one province automatically registers you in other places, some common sense changes, as well as a commitment not to be a protectionist in terms of barriers or procurement of provincial, for example, provincial or local procurement. And so we think this can have a positive impact if we expand it to the country. We do have something called the Agreement on Internal Trade today, but it's a patchwork, and there's so many exceptions. With the U.S. partnership, we started off by saying, look, everything is going to be open to free trade unless we, by consensus, create some exceptions, which occurred on the cultural industry side and a few others. Sure. The AIT was the opposite. The Agreement on Internal Trade said everything's protected and we got to negotiate it in. And so we got a kind of a patchwork that doesn't work very well, I would say. Certainly we could do better. If you're in Europe right now, you arguably have a more level playing field to get to Canadian procurement than if you're in another province in the country, and that just seems dumb. So
if it's such a good idea, and you and as I said, James Moore are certainly on board, as are Alberta and BC, why is it not happening? What's the holdup?
Well, there has been progress at the provincial table. In fact, shortly after I was able to get to the table, so credit to my predecessor, Premier Calvert, for his role in this, we had real progress on the issue of labor mobility. By the way, we can do better there as well, but some progress to recognize trades and certifications across the country. It's certainly better than the way it was. But I think just the way that the Agreement on Internal Trade, AIT, was approached in terms of protecting all industries and negotiating sectors in, made it impossible to get a robust agreement. And I think that's what we can do now. And if people wonder or not whether we have barriers, unnecessary barriers, try buying a bottle of wine in the Niagara region, or maybe sharing a case or with a few people and trying to bring them back to your province, or from BC, or same with beer from Saskatchewan elsewhere. And it's, by the way, on that issue of wine and beer, we'd need the federal government involvement because there's legislation at the federal level. By and large, though, we can achieve this Canada Free Trade Zone at the provincial level without the involvement of the feds.
See, as soon as you mention wine and beer, you've got people on board, and you know that. Let's talk a little bit about the flooding in your province. You said the damages higher than the $360 million it cost after the 2011 floods. Do we have a sense of numbers right now, what this is going to cost the province, and what you might be getting from the federal government to help you out?
Nothing new to report. Greater than the $360 million we think that occurred in 2011. The federal government will be there through the Provincial Disaster Assistance Program. That's a joint federal-provincial initiative, and a welcomed one at that. Now, there is the issue of mitigation, though. We see the federal government allotting some money, 50-cent dollars, for mitigation, so we can be better prepared to deal with floods in the future. May perhaps avoid evacuations, avoid some of the more acute problems we saw in Saskatchewan, and hopefully that we avoid in Manitoba now in the days ahead. But so we need there, by the way, on that front, to be a little bit more money in that kitty. The federal government has the program. We worry that the amount's not enough. And the Western premiers are meeting as well, and we think a product of that meeting will be a call on flood mitigation dollars to be increased from the feds. And we also, by the way, hope to take this matter of a Canada Free Trade Zone to the Western premiers meeting, which would add Manitoba and the 3 territories.
Just on the mitigation issue, do you think that you need to work more closely with Manitoba in order to come up with some solution? Because, as you know, all your water pouring over into them right now, and they're dealing with the situation as well. Do you need to work more closely together?
We have in the past. Early on, when the federal government first agreed to this kind of a program, I think it was a joint initiative. Premier Salinger had taken the lead, and we supported him. And yesterday, I called Premier Salinger to again talk about this issue, and we're going to be raising it together at the Western Premiers meeting, although we'll both be attending by teleconference.
Brad Wall, always good to speak with you, sir. Thanks.
Thanks, likewise. Thanks for having me on.
And